The vision's so blurry, but yet so clear.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_bball. Today we're going to be looking back at the 2018-19 Washington Wizards season, talking about what went right, what went wrong, what we can expect for the future, and some other things along the way. Michael Bolton, he is ready.
Let's get to it.
Let's get to it indeed. A really disappointing season from the Wizards. I had them in the playoffs. They obviously didn't get there with a 32-50 record. They have the 6th highest odds for the number 1 overall draft choice, 9% odds there. If everything falls according to record, they will have the 6th pick in the NBA draft. So I think a lot of people would be a bit surprised to see Washington falling in there with pick number 6, a little higher than people may expect. You look at teams like Dallas and Memphis; they are coming after Washington in that level. Even the Pelicans. So, or I guess the Pelicans, you could make that argument that I'm just talking about expectations. Where if people said to you Washington has the 6th pick, I think a lot of people would be surprised that is actually the case heading into this season. In terms of other draft picks, they don't have too much more. They have a second round pick that is protection, and they don't get that second round pick. So all they have is the first round pick, that pick number 6. No second rounders at all. Their second round pick has gone to Charlotte at pick number 36 as part of a trade. So the Wizards just have that one selection coming in. We'll look at their free agency stuff in a second. As I said, they finished 32 and 50th, 14th in offense, 28th in defense. That's a real problem. Obviously, 9th in pace. So they have, over the past couple of years, really upped their pace. Their three-point shooting, really poor, 26th in the NBA, 34% overall as a team. Poor rebounding. Now, they were really good at generating steals, 7th, generating assists. They were 6th, generating assists. They were 6th in that area. They were 3rd in the NBA in forcing opposition turnovers as well. So there were some positive things there for the Wizards. Not too bad at getting to the free throw line. That the pace was solid. The defensive stuff's really a problem, and they allowed the opponents to shoot 54.6 effective field goal percentage against them, which was 29th in the NBA. So really poor in that regard. If we have a look at their upcoming free agency situation, we've got Jabari Parker's team option, which is $20 million. There is almost no way that the Wizards, they don't have a new GM, so I don't know what their new GM is going to do. There's no way that they're going to want to pay Jabari Parker $20 million. There's Trevor Ariza, who's an unrestricted free agent, and there is Jeff Green.
My name is Jeff,
who is an unrestricted free agent. There's been noise all throughout the season. They want to bring both of these guys back. Of course, that was when Ernie Grunfeld was in power. He isn't anymore. They shouldn't be looking to bring back both of those guys, and it really depends on how much you're looking for Ariza, whether he comes back at all. I don't think he should be a priority type player. And then they've got a bunch of restricted free agents. Tomas Satoransky, Slam and Sammy Dekker, Punch Bob Shitbloke Bobby Portis, Tom Bryant, and Chase Randall. Well, to me, Tom Bryant's the obvious one. He will be back almost no doubt. Portis has an extremely highly inflated opinion of himself, so he is going to be looking for a significantly larger deal than he should be entitled to get. So I think there's a chance he isn't back. I think Satoransky will be back. Dekker and Chase and Randall, they're not going to have too much of an impact either way. So they can get their cap space up to, actually, let's rephrase that. Their cap space, the max cap space they can get this season is $8 million. So they're not going to be cap space players. They would need to look to a trade of John Wall at his $38 million to clear some room. That's not going to happen. They've got $15.5 million of Jan Mahinmi on the books as an expiring deal. You're going to have to give up assets to get rid of that. You've got Dwight Howard, who has opted into his player option at $5.6 million on the books there as well. And Brad Beal at $27 million. And of course, Beal is their best player now. And whether he is traded, they're going to, if they are trading him, they're getting a lot of assets back in that sort of a deal. So in terms of free agency players, it is going to be tough for them to do that. They got an interesting off-season up ahead. It looks like it's going to be another really bad season for the Wizards, with John Wall likely to miss nearly all of the season, tearing his Achilles in his rehab from that leg injury that he suffered during the season. So yeah, multiple injury rehab issues, and the Achilles is never a good sign for a guy like Wall at the age of 29. So cap space is going to be at a premium for this squad. $109 million of guaranteed salary already on the books for next season, giving them very, very limited ability to make any moves, and that's why I do think that. Well, actually, I was going to say that makes it unlikely they bring Jabari back. Look, $20 million, he's not worth that sort of salary, but if they're not going to be able to make any other sort of free agency moves at all, then maybe they do exercise that team option for Jabari, maybe look at him as a $20 million trade chip at some point, as an expiring deal, because that they can obviously exercise that team option, bring him back, that takes them over the salary cap. But were they going to be using that cap space for anything else? Probably not. They can use the fact that they've got restricted holds on Satoransky and Portis and Bryant to go over the cap, but whether they want to pay the luxury tax or not remains to be seen. And that if they are looking to pay, and I think almost definitely Portis is gone from this squad. I don't think they'd want to be bringing him back, and again, considering he thinks he's going to be worth $16 to $20 million, which is an absolute nonsense number from Bob Portis. I do have to remind you guys to make sure you do subscribe to this podcast, Locked On Fantasy Basketball, by using the Himalaya podcast app. So download that app and subscribe to this podcast, and you'll never miss an episode. All right, let's take a look at some of these players now. The first guy we're going to look at here is Brad Beal, the 13th ranked player overall. An absolutely massive season from Beal. Another guy, I'm not touching him, he's injury prone. 82 games from Beal, 37 minutes a night. He averaged 25.5 points, 2.5 threes, 5 rebounds, 5.5 assists, and 1.5 steals with 0.7 blocks, 48, 81, and 35% from 3. So you could look at that and go, well, actually, he could shoot better from 3, and then his numbers could get better. Over the final 30 games of the season, he was the 5th ranked player in fantasy. His numbers aren't as good as that over the course of the season because John Wall was there for chunks of the year, and at the end of the season, he did start to reduce that playing time down, and over the last 4 games, he played 22, 31, 23, and 17 minutes as he just basically played out the year to keep the 82-game streak going. So, is there a realistic opportunity for Beal to be a first-round player next season? Absolutely. What he did this year, if we look at those last 3 months' numbers, 27, 5, and 6, look, there's absolutely zero reason he can't do that. And he did it while shooting 34% from 3. Get that to 37% from 3, and he's averaging 28.5 points a game. The 5 rebounds, the 6 assists, that's all real. Now, 1.8 steals is significantly higher than anything he's done throughout his career. Last year, 1.2. The year before, 1.1, 1.0, 1.2, 1.0. This year, he was up at 1.5, so already an elevation. And then those last 3 months, he took it even a step further. He also upped his block rate significantly. He'd been at the last 5 years, 0.2, 0.3, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4. This season, 0.7. So really, and those numbers, those block numbers, those defensive numbers, those small changes in volume are such a big deal in terms of changes in ranking. He went from the 35th ranked player to the 13th ranked player this season, and again, that 5th ranked player over the last 3 months because of those defensive stats. So there's a little bit of Oladipo about it to me with Beal. While we love what he did and people are going to be really going the old two-hand Dutch rudder on him, will he be able to maintain that level of defensive stuff? Because he could keep up scoring 27, 5, and 6, no problem. But if the steals go from 1.8 to 1.2, if the blocks go from 0.7 to 0.3, then he isn't the 5th ranked player. He's not the 13th ranked player. He's the 20th ranked player. He's the 22nd ranked player. And if you spend pick 7 on him, it's a disappointment. And then if the shooting has a slump and he goes from 49% shooting over the last 30 games down to 45% shooting, then you're talking about a guy like Oladipo who is really struggling to regain that form. So early warning stuff from Beal. While I love him and he was fantastic and those numbers were awesome, 1 year spikes in both defensive numbers, which may not be sustainable. Now, it's not as unsustainable as Oladipo, who was putting up like 3 steals a game, which for every man and his dog should have stood out like dog's balls, that was not going to stick. 1.8 steals, not as hard to maintain, but for a guy who's never been anywhere near that, never been sniffing that number, it does ring a few alarm bells to me that if someone's taking him at pick 6 or pick 7 or pick 8, then there might be in for a little bit of a rude awakening there if those numbers fail to live up to the expectations that he'd set for himself. But a massive season, plus 2.35 PIPM, 9 wins added, a huge number, plus 6.4 on court, he was absolutely excellent. Let's talk Johnny Wall, who even before the injury was struggling a bit, the 30th ranked player. He is going to be 29 by the time he returns from his Achilles injury. He played 35 minutes a game, 21 points, 3.5 rebounds, and 9 assists with 1.5 steals and 0.9 blocks. And unlike Beal, those elevated block numbers, that's real from John Wall. He is an excellent shot blocker. He also shot a weird 70% from the free throw line and just 45% from the field, although that's not that bad for him considering he has struggled there. But his free throws are weird. Look at his career numbers. 77, 79, 80, 81, 79, 79, 80. And then the last 2 years, 73 and 70. He's doing a Westbrook, and the numbers are dropped off significantly. This is 2 seasons of it, albeit only 73 games over the last 2 years combined. But why are his free throws dropping so far? That takes him from being a guy that you're taking at the end of the first round, second round, to this guy who's been ranked in the 30s the last 2 seasons. Of course, we're not taking him at the end of the first round, start of the second round next season, because he's not going to play for the majority of the year. And with how bad Washington's going to be, you would imagine he would only just come back in limited minutes at the end of the year and have very, very little impact, not like a DeMarcus Cousins who's coming back with something to play for, as he did for the Warriors this season. So It's not a great outlook for John Wall. Unbelievably, the team was 3.5 points per possession better off with him, per 100 possessions better off with him on the bench. So his on-off was a negative 3.4, which is obviously not a good number for a guy that you're paying $40 million to. He had a negative PIPM. He was a 1.42 wins added. He is really staring down the barrel of some really tough years coming up. But in saying that, he still averaged 21 and 9. With 1.5 steals and a block, which for fantasy is really, really strong. And if the free throws go back to 80% and he gets those rebound numbers back up, then you're talking about a guy who can be a top 20 guy. I have real doubts about it, given this Achilles injury and given the slump over these couple of seasons. And his on-court stuff is really a struggle at this stage. And I think we're in for some pretty rough John Wall years coming up, which is annoying because he's been not a favourite of mine, but a guy that I've liked him, his player, liked his fantasy output over the past couple of seasons. And it does bear mentioning that he did hit a career high in three-pointers made per game this year, despite shooting just 30%, so way more, ready to take that shot. Ready is not the word I was looking for. I just had a real big brain fart. The next guy we're going to talk about is Big Trevor Ariza, who came across in that trade from the Phoenix Suns. He was the 92nd ranked player over the course of the season, played 34 minutes a game, 12.5, 5.5, and 3.5, with 2 threes and 1.3 steals, shot horribly, 39.9%, 79 from the line and 33 from 3 for a true shooting of just 53%. His field goal percentage has never been good. He has not cracked 42% from the field in any of the last 5 seasons. In fact, just once in the last 8 seasons has he gone over 42% from the field. So you know that you're going to be in a field goal percentage hole when you have Trevor Ariza. But the thing that really hurt him this year in terms of his overall value was his steal rate. He'd been at the last 4 years at 1.92, 1.8, and 1.5, down to 1.3. And over the time in Washington, under 1 steal per game, pushing him outside the top 100 in that time. And that's somewhat of a concern when we look at Ariza moving forward, who is going to be 34 next season. Will they bring him back? Will they start him? I think that he is significantly overrated in fantasy circles. He can still do some things defensively, but overall, his defensive PIPM in the negative this season. He had a neutral overall PIPM. He wasn't fantastic during this season, and at this age, I think a significant drop-off is likely for Ariza. I think with the elevation of someone like Troy Brown, who started to play well at the end of the season, you might see... Now, I think if they do bring Ariza back, that he will start, but if he goes to another team, I don't know that he's going to find himself in this role, and again, he is 34 years of age. So... we don't expect big jumps up in his athletic ability. The steal rate will continue to stay low. He never gets really assists, although this season the assist numbers were significantly higher than anything he's done in his career. And you just worry that the usage rate, the efficiency, the defensive stuff, which has been such a lifeline of his numbers, and his best fantasy category has always been steals. And he had a stretch of 3 years in a row where his Z score in the steals category was in excess of 2. This year, 0.9. So if those steal numbers continue to decline, you do really have to worry about what that means for Ariza moving forward. And I'll say it now that I really don't expect him to be a top 100 player next season, and probably not a standard league draftable guy, but so much of that is going to depend on where he actually ends up in free agency and how all those rosters end up looking. The next guy we take a look at, another player acquired in a trade, this time at the trade deadline. Punch Bob Shitbloke Bobby Portis ended up the 115th ranked player overall in fantasy. Played 26 minutes a night in 50 games, averaged 14 and 8 with 1.5 threes. Of course, no defensive numbers and no assists. 1.4 steals, 1.4 assists, 0.7 steals, 0.4 blocks. A true shooting of under 53%, hitting 44 and 79 from the field and the line. And amazingly, he hit 39% of his threes. He just struggled in those other areas. He was better in Washington than Chicago. He played more minutes, 27 minutes a night during his time in Washington, as opposed to limited minutes in Chicago. In Washington, he averaged 14 and 8.5. Still, steals and blocks are low, no assists. Shot 40% from three in Washington. Hit his free throws at a solid rate, but doesn't get to the line very much. I don't believe in Bobby Portis. I don't think he's a starting caliber player. If he's getting 27 minutes a night, he is probably close to a top 100 guy. He can put up some fantasy stats, but his ceiling is limited by low efficiency, low steals, low blocks, low assists. Now, next season, you're going to have an improvement from Thomas Bryant, the number 6th overall pick coming in. We don't know what position that guy is going to play. Plus the return of Dwight Howard, who missed all of last season. And while you can say Dwight has struggled, and he has, Portis was playing that backup role behind Tom Bryant, and Howard's got to come in and play those minutes. Now, do they take the minutes away from Bryant? Do they take them away from Portis? And that's even assuming Portis is on this team. If anyone's investing in Portis as a starting center or starting power forward in the NBA, they're going to be very, very disappointed, in my opinion. He just struggles so much defensively as a big man that it's really hard to get past. Now, to be fair to him, the Wizards were 3 points per 100 possessions better off with him on the court. That's obviously a positive there. Yeah, a negative 0.18 PIPM. Defensively, still a negative in that area. So he was much better in Washington than what he was in Chicago, but I still don't think he's the sort of player you want. A guy who has absolutely zero vision, inefficient, plays no defense as well, and loves going out there and looking intense and putting up numbers at the expense of his team winning a lot of the time. So I'm not a massive Bobby Portis fan in terms of his play. The other guy that came across in that deal, Jabari Parker, the 121st ranked player over the course of the season, he played 27 minutes a night, averaged 14.5 and 6.6 rebounds, had a 3 a game. Like Portis, lacked in steals and blocks, was more efficient, 49% from the field, only 71 from the line, weirdly. He is a pretty good free throw shooter normally. So that was a little bit of a weird one. He'd been at 74 each of the last 2 seasons, down to 71 this season. And while 74 is still a negative, it's not as large of a negative, quite obviously. But his inability to, again, like Portis, have assists, steals, or blocks limits his overall fantasy upside. It was an improvement from Parker this season versus last season, but an improvement in Washington versus Chicago. He had a strong end to the season as well, where he was a top 90 player over the final 25 games of the year. But that doesn't mean that he is going to be able to replicate that really as we move forward. He was a negative 0.36 PIPM. That's not a terrible number, but it's not an elite type of a number. The team was 3.1 points per 100 possessions better off with him on the court. Of course, that's good as well. So he did show some positives. I'm not going to be just all negative on Jabari Parker, but in terms of him getting better and moving forward from here, I have my worries. I don't know what team he fits on. And it's all good. Look, if he can play 31 minutes a night, he's a clear fantasy must-roster player, because his ability to score, he can get some rebounds, he can hit some threes, he can just do a little bit in some of those other areas. It can be useful. But if he finds himself in a backup role where he probably should be, then it's unlikely that he's going to force his way. I don't think he's good enough to force his way into a large enough role. He looked like he was forcing his way out of the NBA with his play in Chicago, but did redeem himself in Washington. But his absolute apathy on defense is a real problem, especially both him and Portis as defense optional big men. That's really not the way the NBA looks at guys in those big man positions. You've got to be able to provide something defensively. I thought he did improve again, though, to be fair to him, in Washington. His defense was a little bit better, but still, it's like him and Portis are the same guy. Lack of vision, very single-minded in scoring, and then lack of effort and apathy on defense and poor positioning. All that sort of stuff adds up. But much better in Washington than Chicago. Maybe there was an issue with the front office / coaching staff and morale in Chicago. Who knows? But of course, when you got the opportunity to extend your coach for 3 more years in Chicago, you absolutely have to take that chance every moment that you get it. Jabari, he is an interesting one. I don't see the fit of where he goes in the NBA and what team's going to really embrace him. He finished really well around the rim. 71% of the rim is a fantastic number. That does give me some concern that maybe that falls off and then his efficiency does drop away, but he was impressive. Another guy who was impressive and I think could really build on this next season is Big Tom Bryant of the Washington Wizards. I was a fan of his as a member of the Lakers. I loved what he did in the G League last season. I criticized the Lakers for waiving him. I thought it was a good pickup from the Wizards, but I didn't expect we'd get this much Tom Bryant. We had Dwight Howard go down early. We had Ian Mahinmi playing minutes early, and Scott Brooks really mishandled Bryant for nearly all of the season outside of the last 2 months of the year. Even though he was playing well, he'd play him 17, 18, 19 minutes a night for absolutely no reason, and when his minutes were big, the production was huge. He was an absolute monster down the stretch of the season. Over the last 3 months, he was a top 90 guy in under 24 minutes a game, averaging 13 and 7. He hits threes, he blocks shots, he's efficient from the field. He's super efficient from the field. In fact, 61% shooting from the field, 78 from the line, a true shooting of 67%. They are absolute monster numbers. He can rebound the ball, he can hit the three. If this guy got 29 minutes a night, he would push top 50. With Portis potentially coming back, I'm not sure about that. With Dwight Howard around, with Ian Mahinmi's corpse still running around there, and Scott Brooks's hesitance to use Bryant, it is a little bit of a concern as to what's going to happen. But I think that he is a guy they should be investing in over Dwight Howard, obviously over Mahinmi, and to me, obviously over Portis, and really trying to develop him. Turn him from a guy that plays 21 minutes a night into a guy that plays 26 minutes a night. Give Dwight the 22 backup minutes there, and then you develop Bryant, and then the next season after that, see if you can push him to be a 30-minute-a-night center. I think there is a possibility there for Bryant. I think his upside is really high. I think he's got absolute sky-high, top ceiling-wise, top 40, top 35 he can get to if everything breaks right in the next 4 or 5 seasons. I think he can get to that level. I'd be really solidly investing in him in Dynasty Leagues. I think that everything at this point, again, they're limited free agent ability. Dwight's back, but he's not the same. Don't think Portis is coming back. That's going to give Bryant, I think, at minimum 23 minutes a night, and probably should be 26 to 27 minutes per night. He was really impressive this season. Posted a positive PIPM, 0.15. There weren't that many guys on this team that did have a positive. In fact, Beal was the leader on this team. The next guy was Otto Porter, who obviously isn't on the team anymore. And then next was Thomas Bryant, and he actually was third on the team in wins added at 2.46 behind Beal and Satoransky. So I'm really, really excited for what Bryant can do as we move forward. He does struggle. He can put up defensive stats, no doubt about that. He can struggle a little bit overall defensively. He's not a great defender. He's better than Portis. He's better than Parker. He does have some struggles there, but he can be relatively dynamic offensively. I think he's in for a pretty 124th this season. I think if I had to put odds on it now, easily inside the top 100 for next season. Tomas Satoransky, 134th this season. I think he's really good. I think he is a starting caliber point guard. He started the season playing a weird role. He started at small forward at a time, backed up at the small forward position, and then when John Wall went down, he was installed as the starting point guard. He's not a high-scoring guy. He's a low-usage guy, really low usage, 14% usage this season, but he just is effective at what he does. 134th in 27 minutes a night, 9, 3.5, and 5 with a steal and 0.8 threes, shooting 48 and 82, including 39% from 3 for a true shooting of 59%. So it is low usage. I'd love for that 14% usage to go to 17, to go to 18%, because we've seen the last 2 years that he has been putting up efficient seasons. 62 true shooting last year, 59 true shooting this season, an ability to distribute the ball, an ability to play some defense. He had a PIPM of negative 0.09, so about neutral in that area, which is one of the highest on this squad. Plus 2.8 on-off as well, replacing Johnny Wall and starting alongside John Wall at times. I really do think there are some interesting numbers. And him as a starter, he averaged almost 11 points, 4 rebounds, 6 assists, and 1.2 steals, and still shot 40% from 3 at 59% true shooting. So really impressive overall numbers. What is his ceiling? That's the question. And if Wall, now I fully expect Satoransky to be back with the Wizards as a restricted guy, and with Wall out for the season. So I expect this coming season to be Satoransky's best career season, and probably the best. And when I say best career season, like best career season even for future years. I'm not sure that he can do better than what he's going to do this coming year. But with his low usage, where does he go from here? Can he push into the top 100? I'd looking at him as a guy that you'd take in the Darren Collison range from last season, that 100 to 120 type of range. Because as I said, this season, he last 3 months, he was a top 85 sort of a guy on 11, 4.5, and 6.5, which is pretty good. The efficiency's there. We just need that usage ramped up. Give me an extra field goal attempt per game. Give me an extra 2 field goal attempts per game. Hit 1.7 threes instead of 0.9 threes. Give me 13 points instead of 11 points, and then you're comfortably in that 75 type of range. So I'd feel okay with him as like a top 100-ish type of a player, maybe top 110, but around that sort of an area. He's going to have pretty much an unencumbered run to be the starting point guard. Chasson Randall's not taking that job. Bradley Beal handles the ball a lot, and that's always going to keep him from being a 9 assist a game guy, because both he and Beal will be 6 assist type guys, which is fine. He contributes in multiple areas, but in terms of looking at him for Dynasty, I do think that the 19-20 season for Satoransky has the chance of being his best ever career season, and then after that, it might be downhill. If he goes to another team, things could obviously change. He is a little bit older than a lot of people heading into restricted free agency. He'll be 28 around Christmas time. So there is some downside coming there, but that's my thoughts on him. Jeff Green, 138th this season. Really impressive stuff from Green, who looked like he shouldn't be playing in the NBA. 27 minutes, 12 and 4. Still, very much Parker and Portis-esque. No assists, steals, or blocks. Efficiency-wise, he was pretty strong. True shooting of 61%. I undersold it. That's massively great in terms of efficiency. But finding that level of role next season with Howard there, depending on what else they do in that position, will they look to give Green this many minutes? Surely they would hope they don't do that. They didn't play him down the stretch of the season. Troy Brown getting those minutes. They'd like Brown to get more of those minutes and not have to force Green into the small forward spot really at all. So while Jeff Green was a top 140 player this season, I really don't see that happening again next year. He was a negative on-off, just negative 0.4, but still a negative. In PIPM, negative 1.6, really, really poor. One of the worst on this team in terms of rotation guys. In fact, the only rotation guys who had worse PIPMs were all guys that were traded. Markieff Morris, Kelly Oubre, and Austin Rivers. They all had absolutely disgustingly bad PIPMs, and they're all out of town. Actually, the other guy, Chasson Randall, I don't know if you've actually called him a full rotation guy, played only 740 minutes over the course of the season. So otherwise, Green was significantly the worst guy out of the rotation guys who were there at the end of the season. Let's talk Dwight Howard, a terrible season, 9 games, 26 minutes, 13 and 9. It's hard to make a full judgment on that because 13 and 9 is still pretty good. 0.4 blocks is terrible, but is that just a 9-game sample size? Is that his back causing a problem? 62% from the field is really good. 60% from the line from Dwight is still pretty strong, but he takes 5 attempts per game, or he took 5 attempts per game, and that is still making that a pretty significant negative in that area. Again, with 9 games and how many minutes? 230 minutes he played, you can't really make a huge determination on what his value is going to be. But he is 33 years of age already. And again, they've got Thomas Bryant there, who I think they'd want to see what they can develop. I don't think we're looking at Howard as anything more than a stream guy for next season. Not a guy you're taking in the first 12 rounds of fantasy leagues. A guy that you're looking at if you've punted free throws. Because even if it doesn't matter, if you grab Howard in round 6 or you grab him in round 13, it doesn't matter where you grab him. It's a value at there, pick 13. Because if you grab him, you turn into a punt free throw team. It doesn't matter what round you grab him. Just because you grab him in round 13 doesn't minimize the impact that free throw percentage has. So if you're already in the lower ends of free throw percentage, grabbing him down there, maybe they play him 26, 27 a night, and he gives you 14 and 10 with 1.4 blocks. And 65% from the field. That's excellent return there, but you've got to be ready to absorb an absolutely horrible free throw percentage hit. It's not like, it's value when you get there, because it will still destroy that area and really muck up the overall strength of your team. The other guys in this team, Devin Robinson only played the 7 games. I think Robinson's got a little bit of a future in the NBA, but he didn't show me massive amounts this season for me to get overly excited. Other guys there, you got Slamming Sammy Dekker, who probably had his best NBA season. I'm not sure as a restricted guy if he's going to be back on this squad, and even if he is, he's not going to be in any sort of long-term rotation role. Jordan McRae played well, scored well down the end, but he's 28 years of age, and I don't really think that he is going to be anyone that we should be banking on. Chasen Randall was atrocious, and he should not be back on this squad. They need to get another backup point guard in there. The other guy we want to talk about here, of course, is Troy Brown. Still hasn't turned 20. 14 minutes a game, 5 and 3 with 1.5 assists and half a steal on 42 and 68. I think he's going to take a huge leap forward next season. He'll be an every night part of the rotation. He'll be a 20-minute a game minimum guy. Maybe it's 26 or 27. I think he's a strong rebounder as a small forward. He can handle the ball a little bit. He can generate some assists. I think he's going to take one of the biggest steps forward for all the rookies coming up. The team was 2.7 points better off with him on the court, which is massive as a rookie. PIPM negative 1.18 is not great, but it's also not terrible as a rookie. I think there's a lot there to like with Troy Brown. Now, he was the 394th ranked player in fantasy, which is obviously very, very terrible. Negative contributions in every single category, even the percentages, didn't do anything really positive across many areas, but the advanced indicators are there for Troy Brown, which is something, and when we're looking at opportunities moving forward with a guy like Ariza potentially leaving, Jeff Green potentially leaving, Sam Dekker potentially leaving, Satoransky playing the 1 instead of the 3. There are minutes opening up there pretty significantly, and I think that we see a pretty big step forward from Troy Brown next season. He turns into a positive player. It's probably more going to be 3rd or 4th season, as so many guys are, when they really start to hit their stride. But while I don't think he's probably going to be worthwhile looking at as a standard league guy next season, moving from the 394th ranked player into a top 250 or maybe top 200 player, I think is absolutely a possibility with those opportunities opening up. And his ability to contribute across multiple categories, per 36, 12, 7, and 4 with a steal, that's a good base. He's got to get the 3-point attempt rate up, he's got to get the free throw percentage up, he's got to hit his threes at a higher rate. All those things hopefully will come, but those other numbers, there's a pretty solid base there for Troy Brown. That'll do it for me for looking at the Washington Wizards. Make sure you are subscribing to this podcast, Locked On Fantasy Basketball, on the Himalaya Podcast app, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or on Spotify, and on YouTube. Hit subscribe, give me a thumbs up, leave a comment, hit the bell for notifications. You know all of that. Tomorrow we're going to be back to look at the New Orleans Pelicans 2018-19 season. You're not going to want to miss that one. Follow me on Twitter at redrock_bball. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya. Bobby Portis.